this evening or this afternoon to the record book training that we're doing. Thanks to Stark County for setting this up and scheduling this. And so for those of you that I may not know personally that are on, my name is Luis Saldaña. I'm an Extension 4-H Program Specialist out of the district office in Weslaco, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about record books. We're going to talk about two major topics. One will be record keeping as a skill, and then we'll talk about the actual record book as it relates to the competitive side of record keeping in the 4-H program. So assuming everyone can see the screen, we will kind of proceed. And I want to start by talking about record keeping itself. The most important thing to know about record keeping is that it is a function. It's a do. It's something that you physically have to do. Now, how you do that is entirely up to you, and there's lots of options for that, but it's something that you physically are involved in doing. And for many people, or for those of us who use record keeping in many different fashions, it serves as memory. I will tell you that as good as our memory, we think our memory is, when we get down the road and there's been a lot of water under the bridge, and we go back to try to think of what we did and when we did it and how we did it, our memory's going to fail. Someone once said that we all have a perfect memory, we just have a horrible filing system in our brains. So it serves as a memory, so we can go back and look. It also serves as evidence of activities. This is proof, if you will. Not that we need proof, but this is reaffirms that we've done something, done some kind of activity or something. Now, in terms of the type of record keeping, it could be physical record keeping, manual, written. Some people use journals. Some people use calendars. It may be an electronic format. I'll tell you that I have not used a physical printed calendar since probably the mid-90s. And that's good and bad, I will tell you. And so, but it's your choice. And so the idea is it can be written, or it can be electronic, or however and we'll talk a little about some options here in a little bit. But more importantly, why do we even keep records of anything at all? And I've got a couple of things up on the screen for you to see. I mean, just some general categories that we keep records in. For businesses, businesses keep all kinds of records. They keep employment records. They keep, if it's in sales, they keep sales records. They keep expense records. They keep revenue records. They keep all kinds of records. And they don't do that because they don't have any other thing to keep them busy. They do that so that, as we pointed out earlier, they can go back and check. They can use those records to compare previous activities, previous years, make improvements, things like that. We use records all the time with our health. We go to the doctor and they take our blood pressure and our temperature, and they see how tall we are. If they're kids, they measure how they grow over time. And God forbid they take our weight. So we take all kinds of health records, and those are really important. So as we track our health over time, we can go back and reflect and look and see where we've been, where we are now, and maybe where we are in the future. You're going to hear me say some of these words over and over again. And then we keep family records. And so, what family records? What kind of family records? Well, maybe you keep records of birthdays. Maybe you keep records of specific events in your life. Graduations are a bit different, going to be a bit different this year, but we keep records of graduations in the form of photos, in the forms of documents. We may even keep records in the form of certificates. You completed this activity or this course, and we perhaps maybe a baptism certificate or something like that. You keep records of those. And those can be kind of fairly simple, or they can be really complex. I have my mother who just loves genealogy, and so she's got records of dates of birth, marriage records, death certificates for people from all over her family tree for hundreds of years, it seems like, back to the 1500s. So there's all kinds of other family records that we keep track of. There's some catchy words there on the left: managing, capturing, classifying, identifying, storing, tracking, securing, and accessing. But those are the most important kind of things as it relates to keeping records in our record books. So let's talk a little bit about record keeping in 4-H specifically. So when we talk about record keeping in 4-H, it's a youth development function, and we use that to develop, valuable skills in these young people. Helps them set goals and work towards achieving them. I believe, I've said this all the time with kids. I said, how many of you ever heard the phrase practice makes perfect? And, a lot of them will kind of raise their hand, and the idea is, I don't believe that's true. Just the fact that you're doing it doesn't make you better at it. You have to be able to set some goals. You have to be able to see where you've been, where you are now, and where you're headed. So I think practice by itself, making perfect, has to go hand in hand with some kind of records. Okay, some kind of are you running faster? Are you making more shots? If you're in basketball, are you making more shots from the free throw line? If you're in band, are you doing something in terms of your ability to play music? If whatever the case may be, if you're in 4-H, what are your goals? So we use this kind of phrase, do, reflect, apply, as it relates to youth development. And the idea there is we engage young people and have them do some things. Then we ask them to reflect. And to reflect means to go back and look and see how they did. Evaluate some strategies of things that they've done, and then turn around and apply some of the things they've learned in the future. And so it helps them set new goals. I'm going to show you a graphic here, and this is our target. When I say our, I'm talking about 4-H nationwide. This is our targeting life skills model, and if you look at the center section, you see the 4 areas that are actually broken up into head, heart, hands, and health. And you can see that in the bottom left-hand corner of that is the head. I'm getting some feedback. Let's see. Okay. So the bottom left-hand kind of quadrant of that green area is the head part. And you say, well, okay, what does that have to do with record keeping? Well, if you look real carefully, right there in one of those, in terms of that specific target of life skills, is record keeping. So it's clearly one of many developmental skills that we hope that young people will learn by their involvement in the program. That's all great, and that's the youth development side of it. So what does that mean, though, or what do records mean in the terms of helping me on a practical side? The first bullet there is in applications. I have a high school senior right now, and this young man is had 10 years in 4-H plus. He was been in 4-H as a Clover kid and so forth, but his active membership has been 10 years. And his ability to fill out college scholarship applications, college applications. He got a job last summer which required an application. He had to do resumes, things like that. It has a lot of application. You can go directly to your records and pull all of those things that they're asking you to kind of, because your memory is not going to be very good. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the memory and how that impacts some of the way you fill out the record book down the road. Omar mentioned earlier as we were kind of getting started that a lot of them use it for recognition of accomplishments, awards programs, project recognition, things like that. So record keeping as a skill is very, very important in general. It's very important in the 4-H program. And so I want to kind of reinforce that it's got some youth development value, but it's also got some practical value as well. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose and objectives of record keeping in 4-H. Not record books, but record keeping. It allows members to show growth. And the only way, I made the reference to practice makes perfect. The only way we know if we're improving is to know where we've been. So it allows us to show growth. It allows us to see how these young people have grown in their knowledge and how they've grown in their own creativity and their skill level. It helps demonstrate their ability to keep and present written records, because I mentioned, one of the first things I mentioned is record keeping is a do. It's something that you physically do. So that skill level allows them to demonstrate that they can keep written records. It helps document goals, actions, progress, all of those things. And then, of course, finally, it provides a competitive opportunity at different levels for those that want to do a record book. Okay, so when we look at keeping records, there's kind of three main areas. One's goal setting, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Records help us in terms of us being able to set some kind of objective goal that we can reach, and then monitor our progress towards that, and then reflect back and saying, how did we do? One of the ways that we can keep records is through journaling. I'm not passing any form of judgment on that. I'm saying that if, hold on just a second.
No, I don't want to do makeup anymore.
Okay, so if we want to keep journals, a lot of people keep a written journal. That's great. Let me double check and make sure that we don't have anybody in the lobby. I just want to stop. Nope, we're good. I mentioned the calendar, printed calendar. I can tell you that many people, keep a printed calendar, and not only do they keep meeting dates, but they keep other things in those calendars. So you can keep dates in there. You can keep all kinds of information in your calendar. Index box, and like, what is that? Well, it's those boxes where you put index cards. Many people use them for recipes. All the students, that's one strategy that a lot of students will use for studying, is writing notes on index cards, and they keep those in a box. So you can do that if you are so inclined. That's a written form of writing things down. You categorize them however you want, date them, put whatever information you want on, color code them, and they go in a box. You can use a spiral or a binder or something like that. And then you have the electronic methods. And I'm going to share one with you here in just a little bit that's relatively new for this year. And but there's Google Forms. Those of you may be familiar with Google Forms. It's kind of like a platform that you can create these little forms that you can fill out. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when one of my kids was working on his driver's license, the Department of Public Safety required him to log so many minutes of driving in certain conditions. Driving in town, driving on the highway, driving, in different facets of what they had structured for his driver training. And so what we did is we created a form. And we put a bookmark on his homepage on his phone. And so anytime we were out driving, as soon as he stopped or we switched drivers, he would get his phone, he would tap on it, and he would put the date, the number of minutes in 15-minute increments, and the type of driving activity that he had been involved in. And so when he goes, 6 months later, goes to Department of Public Safety to turn in all of his logs, he just downloaded it in an Excel file, excuse me, and he was able to present those records. So again, it's record keeping. Google Forms one way to do that. Social media, one of the interesting things, social media seems to be a good way to kind of track what you're doing, and there's all kinds of advantages. There's some things you may want to be, you don't want to put everything on social media, but one of the things I've thought might be valuable is just about every young person, at least teenagers, probably got some access, not necessarily have one, but have access to a cell phone, or maybe they've got an Instagram account or something like that. They can, while they're doing their activities, they can take a selfie, not just of them, but of them doing the activity, and create a special hashtag for themselves that's related to their 4-H activities. And then down the road, they can search on that hashtag and everything will come up. And that becomes kind of a form of a record. So just some things to consider. There's some mobile apps if you're interested in keep carrying some kind of a platform around on your phone that you can keep. Some of them are free, some of them are for a cost, some of them are not really conducive to what we're talking about for a record book, but they're certainly good for journaling and record keeping and things like that. So, and then the last component is looking back and reflecting, being able to go back. How many of you, and I'll just ask this question, how many of you on your phone will go to your photos and find yourself scrolling back through time, or maybe even on your Facebook page or something like that, scrolling back and reminiscing and reflecting back, oh, I remember going to that event, I remember doing that, I remember taking that photo, I remember when we went to the beach, I remember when we went to the ranch, whatever it is. But we all find ourselves from time to time perhaps reflecting on that form of record. So, at any rate, just some ideas there. In 4-H records specifically, this is kind of the general information that we're trying to keep. Records that we're trying to keep. We want to keep records of goals. What are your goals, or what are their goals? What do they learn? What do they know? What do they want to know? What skills do they have? What skills do they want to develop? Where are they in their leadership and their leadership abilities? The awards and recognition of all their accomplishments are another real important part of our 4-H records. Service learning and community service is another area. What are we doing? Think about right now, and I know Starr County's been instrumental in doing this, as many other people have. In our current situation, the clothing and textiles and 4-H members all across, not just the counties and the state and the country, but all over, are engaging in ways to serve their community in light of the current situation. So kudos to all of them, but keeping track of that. And then taking photos and stories, what happened. And that's where the journaling comes in. It's really valuable. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of these and how it relates to the record book. So in our 4-H records, we have 3 age divisions. We have juniors, so that's 3rd through 5th, intermediates, which is 6th to 8th grade, and our seniors are 9th to 12th grade. And so if you're questioning, saying, well, are we just finishing the school year? It's the summer. Where am I? I'm in the 5th grade, but I'm going to be in the 6th grade. You're in that age division from September to August. So if you in September were in the 5th grade and you're finished 5th grade this week or next week or the end of May, and record books are due in the end of June, you're still in that junior division, that 3rd through 5th grade. So hopefully that clears that up. This next section is the one that I want to point out. If you need to remember something, suggest you remember this right here. The record book has 4 parts. Okay? That's something you can write down. It has 4 parts. It has a check sheet. It has a personal information page. It has a 4-H story and photo portfolio. And then it has the report forms. And we'll get into each of those here in just a little bit. From a competitive perspective, and you say, well, record books are competitive. Well, not necessarily. Again, we're talking about record keeping. Record keeping, if you choose to go down this competitive path, there's a way to do that. There are 25 awards programs, which you can see on your screen there, and they're all based on either projects or project groups. And so we'll talk a little bit later on what do you mean by project groups, and so we'll talk about that. We have competition at the county, district, and state level for record books, and then we'll talk a little bit about Texas 4-H Leadership Conference as it relates to the competitive record books. So I'm going to keeping an eye on the chat, text chat. So if you've got a question or something, please feel free to put something in there. Or if you want to just jump out there, Ahmad is going to kind of moderate that a little bit. If there's some questions, we can certainly get those answered at any point that you feel like you want to ask a question. So I'm going to share something with you, and I posted this on our Facebook feed the other day. May is a very important month when it relates to record books, specifically the competitive record books or the record books that may be required for rewards and recognition at the county level or even district or state. And somebody sent this to me. I did not create this, but it was really fascinating, and I thought there was a little humor in it. And May's record book season, if there is a season for record books. And so they shared this with me. They said, "Oh, I was thinking about record books, and I saw this, so I sent it to you." And they sent it to me in a text message, and I thought it was quite humorous, and so I posted it. This was in 2016. I posted it on our Facebook page, and from 10 o'clock in the morning till I was doing a record book training that evening in Laredo, Texas, and between 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock when I got to Laredo, there was close to 75,000 views or likes, and there was all kinds of shares, and it kind of topped out in a couple of days with 150,000 views. And so the point is, a lot of people can relate to this, and you know, record books can be stressful, and we don't want them to be stressful, but if we wait till the last minute, then probably they're going to be a little stressful. So, you know, you can see the anguish on his face. So, just so that people can kind of relate to that. All right, let's get into the record books themselves. Give me
Please, before you,
yes, sir.
You go in. I think there's a question. Clarissa over at Texas Star may have a question.
Okay. Let's see. So I can choose to.
So I can choose to do my child's record book on those categories like fashion design.
Okay. Well, that's a good question, and we're actually going to kind of address that. Let me go back, and so we'll address that now since the question's posed now. Okay. So you see on your screen, you see these 25 categories. And if you look real close, she put fashion design. There's this category right here. It's fashion and interior design. So the answer to your question would be, if I'm going to submit a competitive record book, it would be submitted in that category, fashion and interior design. And so I'm going to answer this question that's probably some of you thinking, saying, you look through there and you say, wait a minute, I don't see wildlife in there, and I do wildlife as a project. So the solution to that is, and the way we do this on a competitive record book site is, that's where I referenced project groups. So wildlife is not a recognized category for record books. It's certainly a project, but it's not a record book category. So what would I do? You would come up here to the top, and you would submit your record book in natural resources, because wildlife would certainly fit in natural resources. And so if you have a project area that you don't see listed here, that does not mean you can't submit a record book. It just means you have to submit a record book in the appropriate category that you see listed in front of you. So I hope that helps a little bit. And if that's not clear, please, feel free to ask another question, and then we'll go from there. Okay. So let's talk about the record books themselves and what it is about record books that we do and why we do them. It allows members to tell, how they've grown. And I'm not talking about height. I'm talking about grown in their experience. What they've learned through the program, maybe some things that they didn't quite accomplish. One of the things I think is really important about any 4-H project experience is, as we look at young people being involved and trying out different projects, is many of us, dream about certain careers or what we want to do when we grow up, and may come to find that you say, wow, I didn't even know they did. I really wanted to do this my whole life. I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so they get involved in the vet science project, and then all of a sudden they realize they have this real fear of needles. And so they it's not something they can get over, and so they find that they can't. There may be something that they cannot get over in terms of their project experience. So perhaps they find that that's not a good fit for them. And I think that's just as valuable as finding your niche and finding what you want to do. It helps demonstrate the importance of keeping written records and written may be electronic, so granted it may be electronic. Record books are actually printed, so there's still this, if you want to take the word written and imply that it's typed or whatever, but it's basically written. It gives them a platform for goal setting and documenting their activities that lead up to some of those goals. And then, of course, for those of us that are competitive, which I'm one of those, if you're interested in that competitive opportunity, well, you get the platform for that through the record book program. So that's basically our purpose and objectives for record books. You see this information again, about goal setting. And ideally, we're sitting here in May. You should be setting goals in September for the whole year. And that's part of what we encourage people to do. So at some point, maybe you didn't write them down in September. Well, you should have. Maybe they're written somewhere on the wall or in a notebook or something that you just was reflecting as a journal. That a lot of people tend to do is, I'd like to do this year. Maybe I'd like to get that one photo that I've not been able to get, whatever that is. Setting those goals, journaling, then reflecting back. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the mechanics of the record book, and this is a lot of information on the screen. I don't want you to read it all. What I want you to do is, I told you that there were 4 parts of the record book, and this is the record book summary, and it tells you more or less what you have to do. There's the check sheet. There's item number 1. There's the personal information page. That's item number 2. There's the 4-H story and photo portfolio. There's item number 3. And then the last is the 4-H report form. That's item number 4. So you can see those 4 sections. And then the columns that you see, those are just the limitations in terms of space for each of the age divisions. You've got the juniors, the intermediates, and then the seniors. And we'll talk a little bit about each of those. I don't want you to worry about this right here. But you've got the junior column. I kind of went off there a little bit. The intermediate column and the senior column that tells you the specifics, how many entries, how many pages, and all of that, and that's available on the State 4-H website. So let's move on a little further. This is item number 1 in your record book. It's the check sheet, and it's very simple. It's got the 4-H member's name. It's got their county. It's got their district, which if you're in District 12, that would be a 12. The age division would just be junior, intermediate, or senior. And then you've got the category, which is right here. This goes back to those 25 categories that I referenced earlier. So in the case, let's say you do clothing and textiles. You would like to participate in sewing, and you do the fashion show and things like that. Your category would be fashion and interior design, not your project, the record book category. So just keep that in mind. Now, you've got your check sheet, and you've got columns that say county, district, and state. So when you're turning in a record book, all you're going to do, here are the 4 parts of the book: the check sheet, the personal information page, the 4-H story, and the report form. Keep saying this over and over again. There are 4 parts. When you're turning in your record book to the county extension office, did you include the check sheet? This should be at the very front of your book. So you would put a check mark. Yes, I did. Did you include a personal information page? You put a check mark. Yes, I did. Did you include the 4-H story and photo portfolio? Yes, I did. Did you include the report forms? Yes, I did. And then you initial right here as you turn it in. Okay? So this is part 1 of your record book. Now, here's the interesting thing. How much, from a competitive side, is this check sheet worth? I had a teacher in high school that says he was going to give people a pink balloon, which was basically a 0. The check sheet is worth 0 points. However, it will slow down or may prevent you from having your record book go further if it's not filled out completely. So it's really simple. Fill it out. It's not worth any points. You're not going to gain any points. You're not going to lose any points. Just fill it out. Make sure it's your first part of your record book. If your record book advances from county to district, when you submit that book to go to district, those columns in the district column should be checked, and your initials should be here at the bottom, verifying that you turned them all in. Okay, so you put your initials right down here. Okay, clear Part 2. This is the second part of the 4-H record book. The personal information page. It's got a little bit more information, but again, it's your name, your county, your district, address, the number of years in 4-H, and you'll notice right here it says excluding Clover Kid years. You do not become a 4-H member, an official member, until you're in the 3rd grade. We have 4-H kids participate as Clover Kids from kinder through 2nd. You can't include those activities as a Clover Kid. So ideally you would have a maximum of 9, or depending on the individual, 10 years if you started from the very beginning all the way through. Then the number of years in that main project. We're going to use photography as an example. If I was in photography, I've been in 4-H 10 years or 9 years, but I've only been doing photography for 4, so I would put 4 years because I'm submitting a photography record book. Your address, all of that personal information goes here. Your place of residence, the number of the name of your 4-H club, the number of members in your club, and then this is probably the most important part of your personal information page. The 4-H member signs, the parent signs, and then the county extension agent signs. In this particular case, it may be that the county extension agent signs them when you turn them into the office. So just know that, okay? But very important. What's this worth in terms of the competitive side? Just like the check sheet, absolutely no points. Okay? But just like the check sheet, if this is not filled out correctly, doesn't have the signatures, this could delay or prevent your book from being evaluated appropriately. So make sure you get this part done. Excellent. Now we move into part 3. We're in the 3rd part of the record book, and this is the best part. This is a story. It is intended to be a story, a narrative, which would include photos, and you can see from some of the bullets that you see on your screen what's included. You're including information about yourself, your family, your community, where you grew up, where you moved to, if you moved, anything that you want to tell who you are, when and why you joined the 4-H program, any project goals, starting with your main project. Did you really intend to learn something new or gain some kind of skill? And how 4-H has helped you become a better leader over time, perhaps. So some things, really important things that you've learned, and maybe even perhaps how it's influenced your future plans or careers or career goals. Because of 4-H, I'm planning to go into post-secondary education. I'm going to get a 4-year degree, or I'm going to go into a 2-year program and get a certificate. Whatever it is, I'm going to go and become a doctor. Whatever your choices are, use that story to do that. And a lot of people will title it, and they recommend you title it, if you're doing a photography book, as our example, this is my 4-H photography story and photo portfolio. Okay, and so most of them, if it's horse, this is my 4-H horse story and photo portfolio. And you can add a subtitle to that if you want. But this is the opportunity to be the most creative with your experiences. At some point, I'm hoping that we'll move over to the next. What's included in there, and I do recommend. I will say this: I do recommend. Because it asks for who you are and all of those things, I do recommend that the parents read this before they turn it in. Because sometimes kids can be a little bit too truthful and share things you may not want them to share. So just, do notice that you want to make sure and read that before they turn that in. But it should include photos. It's a 4-H story and photo portfolio. And it shouldn't just be a repeat of what you put in the book. You want to include new information or be able to expand. There's going to be some areas in the record book where you want to say more, but you can't. Here's your opportunity to say more about that. Captions will help if you're going to put in photos. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but we're not all photographers. So a caption may be helpful to kind of help interpret what's going on. So that's in your 4-H story and photo portfolio. Those are the kind of things that you need to include. it should be completed within the page limits, and there's that chart that I showed you earlier, tells you how many pages you've got, and it's in the record, the family guide. Text should be double spaced, and a minimum of 10-point font. Remember, on a competitive side, somebody is not just reading one book, they may be reading 10, 20, or 30 record books. Small print for old people like me can be really hard. So that's why we say it's got to be no less than a 10-point font. Okay? It's got to be easy to read. I'll even go a step further and say, would you rather read a novel like War and Peace, or would you rather read a magazine or a newspaper? And some would argue I'd rather read a newspaper or magazine. Why? Because it's broken up into columns, it has photos that kind of break up the text, and the photos kind of correlate to the text. So those are the kind of things you want to add to make that more appealing to the reader as they kind of go through there. You want to tell the story, and you can do that with words and with text. And this last green section here is just for specifically photography books. We used to allow an additional 6 pages of just photos of their work, but we have quit doing that a couple of years ago. So just so that you know. Okay, let's go back, and I'm going to say this as one of my last kind of thought about creative use of the 4-H story and photo portfolio. Some of us may remember as kids reading children's books, and they still make these books, where you kind of open it up and there's like a little pop-up, and you pull a little paper tab at the bottom, and there's a dinosaur, and you pull the little paper tab and the little dinosaur's arms move. When we talk about creativity, I have never seen a book like that, but one of these days I'm sure I will. And this is the 4-H members' opportunity to kind of express themselves and be themselves. So take advantage of that. Just don't do it, try to do it overnight. Okay, so we've finished part 3. There's some page limits in terms of the 4-H story and photo portfolio. We'll address those in a little bit. I'm going to get into the 4th part. We're already on the 4th part of the record book. So the report form, there's a couple of points I want to make sure that everybody understands, because record books have changed over time. If you're new to this, you don't have to worry about relearning. If you've been doing record books in the past, or you haven't done one in a few years and you're going to do one this year, know that some things have changed. It's the same form for all age divisions, period. It's downloadable as a Microsoft Word document, or you can, I think it's available in a PDF where you can kind of structure your printing in a way that it prints correctly on the form. If you're skilled in that area, use the Microsoft Word form as well. Requests the same content for all the age divisions. The number of allowable entries varies from age division and age division. In some cases it's entries, in some cases it's page numbers, in some cases it's both. And it's the current year, so everything 4-H members have done since September through now, and 3 previous years. Okay? Now there's a variation to that based on the age division, and we'll talk a little bit about those here in a little bit. So that's effectively the report form. So the idea is, in section 1, so we're going to talk about section 1, which is your 4-H project experiences. What is your project, and how did your project change or grow? And by grow, we don't mean in terms of size, or we want to convey that if you're doing a project, and that project should demonstrate not the actual project, but your involvement should evolve to include growth in that involvement. So what have you done, and what have you learned? If we're talking about photography, and if I'm talking kind of Greek to you, if you know what the f-stop is on your camera, and you didn't know what the f-stop was on the manual mode of your camera, and now you can manipulate the f-stop to get a greater depth of field of your photos. Wow. Okay, those are some things that we're talking about in terms of your growth. You can include learning experiences gained in other community organizations if they're applicable to your 4-H project. Now let's say I'm in a small community and I enjoy photography, and that's really my main project, and I want to do that. But outside of me doing those project activities, having club project group meetings and things like that, there's no other, but there happens to be a local photography group, okay? And I join that photography group and it helps me with my 4-H project. Yes, I can include those kind of project experiences in section 1, okay? Because they fully support what I'm doing with my 4-H project. Individual directed project learning experiences are also acceptable. And by that we mean you don't have to go to a club meeting or a project group meeting to have a positive learning experience. I'll give you an example. We have an activity called Ag Product ID where young people learn fruits and vegetables and meat products and all kinds of Texas ag commodities. And so it may be a trip to your local grocery store and just walking up and down the produce aisle, identifying different fruits and vegetables and what they do for the body in terms of nutrition and things like that. That's an individually directed project experience that you could certainly include in that. Okay. Some, yes, of course, if there's group activities, include those. But if not, you can do those individually. In section 1, you can have up to 4 projects for the current year and then 3 preceding years. So photography has been my example. I can put everything in my photography project I've done this year and the photography activities I've done for the last 3 years. Or 3 years back for a total of 4. And I can have up to 4 projects. But my first one listed will be photography, and then I do rabbits, and then I do leadership, and then I do goats, or whatever, maybe clothing is the other project. So you can put all 4 of those in there. Maximum page limit in section 1 is 2 pages for juniors, 3 for intermediates, and 4 pages for seniors. And that's section 1. It's basically a blank group of pages. Answer those questions. You get to section 2 and it's asking for leadership experiences. Now this is actually a table, so you don't get that blank page. You have to fill in the columns and rows and that. And so it includes the year, when it happened, the leadership activity itself. Don't use acronyms, and this applies to many things in your book. Don't use acronyms unless you absolutely have to, because many people do not know what those acronyms mean. They may mean something to you, but they may not necessarily mean something to the person that's reading it. What the role is, was it promotion leadership? Was it volunteer leadership? Was it elected leadership? Or was it appointed leadership? Okay. What you did to assist others through this 4-H year. So include general leadership, like I was an officer, or I was on a committee, or I was a committee chairman, whatever that may be. You can include the current year and up to 3 years of activities. If you're a junior, you can only include up to 2 previous years for juniors. And then you can see the page limits. These page limits and entry limits will be consistent across some of these sections. Juniors, it's 10 entries. Well, I have 12 items that I want to list. Well, if you're a junior, you're limited to 10, so you got to pick. And so why is picking such a big deal? When you go back to your records, and these are however you chose to keep those records. If you keep records, then you can go back and say, well, which of those 12 or 15 or 20 are the most important? And then you can begin to, and that helps you on a competitive side, be able to pick the most significant. When you're struggling just trying to remember what to put in there, that kind of puts you at a disadvantage from a competitive side. So that's why the records are really important. So you've got, and it says, well, why 10 entries in 1 page? Well, it gives you 10 entries, and then it gives you the ability to add space within that row to put your narrative. But, again, you're limited to 10 entries and 1 page. If you have 8 entries and it gets to 1 page, that doesn't give you 2 more entries on the next page. Your maximum is both 10 entries and 1 page. Okay? If you have 9 and it's 3/4 of a page, then you're good. And then the same rules apply to the intermediates and the seniors as well. So that's section 2, leadership experiences. Section 3 is community service. It includes the year, your role, the service activity, and for me, as an evaluation or a person that's evaluating these record books, this is the most significant part out of that whole entry, is the importance and impact on you and others. Okay, why was it important for you to include that community service activity? What impact did that have on you or others? And so you include that. It's a table form, and you see the green bar at the bottom. It's the same kind of criteria there. You can list community service, service learning, cleanups, collections, construction, care packages, sewing, face coverings, and donating those to healthcare providers, as many people in Starr County have done. Whatever that is, you can include those in there. You can include the current year and then 3 preceding years. This is just 4-H community service projects. I use this as an example. It's all good. It's just a matter of how this affects record books. If I go on a mission trip with my church and I get there and I open my suitcase and it's day 1 and we're going to build this schoolhouse in this place in Central America or something like that, and I open my suitcase and the first shirt I see is my favorite 4-H shirt, so I put that on and I spend the day helping build this schoolhouse. Was I doing a 4-H community service project, or was I doing a church community service project? And the answer to that is I was doing a church community service project. It's not what shirt you're wearing that makes it a 4-H or not 4-H activity. It's who were you there representing. So just keep that in mind. There is a place for you to do to show you were involved in other organizations and doing other community service, but this is specifically 4-H community service activities. Section 4, other 4-H projects. So we say, okay, well, what do you mean other? Well, the section 1 says I could have up to 4. So this gives me the ability as a 4-H member to say, well, I've got 6 projects. You can put those other 2 here. There you can list any other projects not listed in section 1 and include the number of years and summarize their participation. Okay? There's some limitations in terms of page numbers, one page for juniors and 2 pages for intermediates and seniors. And the reason there's that yellow little asterisk there is because last year that was different. So if you're using the current year's information, you'll be fine. Current year's forms, you'll be fine because it's very explicit. If you're using information from last year or last year's forms, it's going to be something different. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that it may be a little different. And so one of the questions that comes up is, I only have 4 projects. What do I put in section 4? If you're doing this for awards, then you probably don't need to put anything. If you're doing this for competitive side of record books, I will tell you that you're going to have to make a conscious decision to say, I do not want to leave section 4 blank because I'm going to lose all those points. I'm going to go to section 1. I'm going to take one of my 4 and move it to section 4 so that 4 is not empty. Does that make sense? And so you don't lose. You're going to lose a little points in section 1, but at least you don't lose all the points in section 4. Now, that being said, there are a lot of projects that young people are involved in, 4-H members are involved in, that they don't give themselves credit for. Leadership can be a project. Community service can be a project. For those that are involved in livestock judging, years ago, livestock judging was approved as a project. So don't sell yourself short. And I use photography for many reasons, but I tell people all the time, photography is one of the best projects you can do because you can incorporate it to just about any project you're involved in. Clothing and textiles, you can take photos. Natural resources, you can take photos. Shooting sports, you can take photos. Livestock, you can take photos. You can take photos of all of that. So use some of those projects that complement your project experiences, and you can include them here in your record book in section 4. Section 5, 4-H recognition and awards. Specifically 4-H recognition and awards. Again, what level, or what year, what level, what recognition you got, and again, in my humble opinion, the importance to you. Many people focus on ribbons and trophies. There are forms of recognition that do not include a ribbon or trophy. Think about what those may be. Perhaps you have being asked to serve on a committee in the community because of your involvement and leadership in 4-H. That's certainly a form of recognition. It's a recognition of your abilities. So don't focus too much. I'm not discounting the importance and the value of grand champion this and grand champion that and first place this and first place that. Those are all really important. But don't limit yourself to those. And then focus on the most important part is what that meant to you. Include your current year and 3 years, and then you see the limitations there in terms of entries and pages. It's a table, so you get 10 entries and 1 page for juniors, 15 entries and 2 pages for intermediates, and 25 entries and 3 pages for seniors. That's section 5. Section 6, here's the opportunity. I use that example of the mission trip. I'm also in band. I'm also in track. I'm also in my local community food bank group that I help with. That's not affiliated. It's not part of my involvement in 4-H program. Maybe I'm part of the Toastmasters or some other organization. Here's your opportunity in section 6 to put anything that's not 4-H related in there. There's limited details as far as how many years and you can include information from, but it can be school, it can be church, or any other community organizations. Your limit is 1 page. Section 7, college and career exploration. As of today, obviously no one's going to hold anyone's feet to the fire, but as they're developing their record book, as of today, what career would you choose? Okay, and use this as that opportunity to express that, list activities that have helped you. If you were wanted to go into sales and you've been involved, maybe you want to go into retail marketing and you've been involved in clothing and textiles. Did you spend a lot of time at local department stores visiting with a manager, talking about inventory and things like that? What are those things that kind of helped you through that? Did you take any tours, any job shadowing, any other coursework, perhaps in school? What led you in that direction? There's some details in there in terms of how many years, 3 preceding years or 2 for juniors, and some page limits, but I want to make this point real clear. College and career exploration are great hands-on experiences, but many 4-H members don't have the opportunity to go take a college campus tour. And I use this as an example. I ran into a friend of mine I hadn't seen in 25 years, and we got to talking, and she told me that, as we talked, we were kind of reminiscing a little bit, and she told me that she did a lot of traveling. And I thought, well, that was great. I mean, I do a lot of traveling, but as we compared notes, it was different. Mine was traveling around the state doing work stuff, and hers was recreational. And I said, well, where have you been? She said, well, I've been all over the world. Really? And I was kind of being a little bit prejudgmental because I didn't quite understand what she was talking about. And I thought, well, wow, how does she afford to go on all these trips? And she'd been to Paris, and she'd been to Milan, and she'd been to all of these places. And so we got to talking a little bit more. I said, tell me more about it. And she said that she'd go to all these places. And how do you manage that? She says, well, I visit those places virtually. And she uses Google Earth. And she literally plans out a trip and walks down the street, if you will, and window shops and does all of this stuff. And then she researches the food, and she orders the food online that's similar to that, and she prepares meals. And so she expands her experience. And the reason I tell you that story is so that you can use that in the context of your college and career exploration. You can have some similar experiences without physically having to go if you don't have that ability. And so if you want to take a virtual college tour online, that counts. So don't sell yourself short in terms of what experiences you can have. And so section 7 is the last section of the book. And that's it. So what will judges look for? They're going to look for clarification on the learning activities that take place throughout their experience. Okay? I want to be able to see as a judge what they do based on their project work, their leadership, their community service, what kind of awards and recognition have they been have they received throughout their experience, what other things outside of 4-H they've been involved in, all of those things. And so as we look at that, we want to be able to look at not just the experience, but how that's progressed in that particular 4-H member's career, if you will. There is a clarification on learning activities that take place outside of 4-H clubs and project groups. Very often members, can enhance their 4-H project learning experiences. And we talked a little bit about that. In the livestock industry, maybe they're involved in a breed association or something like that. So anyway, just know that that's in there. Okay, so the books are submitted for evaluation, and here's the judging criteria. And the first thing I'm going to do is point out that this is the judging sheet, and it only has 2 of the 4 parts of the record book. It has the 4-H story and the report form. Okay, so just know that the other 2 are not worth any points. The 4-H story is worth 30 points, which is here, and the balance, or 70 points, goes back for the report form. Now, I'm going to kind of recap this particular thing. We talked about the section 1 that had up to 4 projects. That section 1's worth 20 points. And then we talked about section 4, which is other 4-H projects, above those 4 projects. That whole section is worth 5. So in terms of the competitive edge, if you will, or what to do in your circumstance, you've got to balance how much do I want to give up on the 20 to not lose the 5. Okay, and so those are just some personal choices that you need to make. Okay, so the score sheet's there. Record book cover, very simple. All types of covers, any kind of binder. The county office may have the green binder that was part of the graphic that you saw at the beginning. The official record book cover, you can get those online if you want to. The office may even have some, but anything is acceptable. Some other details, can it be handwritten? Yes, but if your handwriting is terrible, rethink that, because from a competitive side, someone has to read it. And if it's very difficult to read, not good. Grammar and punctuation count. Don't use text messaging language in your record book. Follow the text and margins. Paper type, don't use construction paper. Be creative is good, but don't use construction paper. Anybody's ever folded construction paper a couple of times know it falls apart. And then follow the font guidelines as well. No smaller than a 10-point font. Okay? Additional changes to note. The photography books, we talked about that, used to have an additional 6 pages, so it's no longer relevant. The old report forms. If you've done record books in the past that had these old report forms, don't include those in your book. The current report form has all the space for all of the information that's included. And then we showed the categories. Here's the 25 categories. If there's not a question about the 25, like we kind of talked about at the front end, just know that I have a project, but I don't know where it goes. It should fit under one of these 25 categories if you're submitting it for competitive record book submission. Okay? If you're doing shooting sports, maybe you're doing shotgun. Well, I don't see a shotgun one. Well, it goes under shooting sports. Okay? So, the winners of record books, specifically seniors, are the only ones that advance to state. If they win their category at state, then they can get into and submit an additional record book in the future years in the same category. So if they win the photography record book, senior photography record book this year, they can submit a photography record book next year and possibly win. If they win, they become eligible to participate in Texas 4-H Leadership Conference, which is generally the weekend of Thanksgiving. They leave on that Thursday of Thanksgiving. They go to Washington, D.C. It's a great trip. They come back, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday, and it ranges in cost from $1,250 to $500. But the only people that can go to that are the ones that submit and win senior winning state record books. So that's the record books in a nutshell. I hope you found this kind of somewhat helpful. I tried to keep it to an hour. I can talk 50 miles an hour with gusts up to 70 sometimes, so hopefully I didn't leave too many people behind. And if you've got any questions, please contact Omar. My email is on your screen. You can certainly email me, but work through Omar and Yolanda in the County Extension Office, and they can provide you a lot of guidance and help and support as you work on your record books. Omar, is there anything you want to share with the group?
No, Luis, thank you so much for doing this for us. One of the things that I wanted to make...
My pleasure, Omar. Yeah, my pleasure. I was just going to say my pleasure.
Oh, okay. All right. One of the things that I wanted to mention, when it comes to record books, is one of the things that I like to, to mention when we do record book trainings is that record books, completing a record book and keeping records of all your 4-H activities comes in very important at the end of your 4-H career whenever you start applying for scholarships. I know that if you're going to be applying for the 4-H opportunity scholarships, the format in which you do the record books is almost exactly the same as a scholarship application, but other scholarships that I've seen, like the Farm Bureau and other scholarships that I've had the opportunity to judge and stuff, they almost ask for the very same thing. So whenever you complete a record book and you're keeping all this information and everything, it is really, really helpful at the end when you're applying for those scholarships. So it's something that helps you keep track of all the activities and all the things that you do while you're in 4-H. Another thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know if Luis mentioned this earlier at the beginning, but there is an opportunity to do these record books online. And let me see.
Correct. It's called Z Books, Ahmad, and it's a really good tool. It's a really good tool, and structured so that if you get all the information, you create a profile like you would on 4-H Connect, and then you create individual people profiles within that. And so as you go in and enter that information, when it comes down to printing the record book, it's already done. And so going back to that graphic of that young man that seemed a little stressed out, you can do a record book if you start now and do it in pieces. Don't try to crunch it the night before, because it makes it very, very difficult. Z Suite, not Z Books. Correct. Lisa Margos pointed up there. It's Z Suites. Z Books is something else.
One of the things that I wanted to do, Luis, was to see if I could get control of the presentation here. I think at one point in time it was giving me the option, but it's not giving me the option anymore.
Let me look and see if I can do that. Hold on just a second, Omar. I think I might be able to move you up to a presenter. Make a presenter.
If it's not,
okay, you're good. You're good. Try it. You should be able to do it now.
Right, there we go. One of the things, let's see if I can do this. All right, I don't know if everybody can see my screen now, but this here is the record book. What I did, and just in case y'all need additional information, for your record books, one of the things that I did is I just went up here to the on Chrome and typed in Texas 4-H record books and did a search, and this took me to this page here. And there's a lot of great resources here that you can use to help you put together your record book. Of course, there's a PowerPoint presentation. There's a guide to the record books. There's also video trainings. And there's also, most importantly, the forms are here that you're going to be using to do your record book. So you can go ahead and download the latest form, which is going to be the 2019 form. Download those, and this will have the Texas 4-H report form. Those are the only forms, and I think the information page at the beginning, there won't be any forms for the story, and there will be a form, I think, for the last section, which is on where you do the research for the colleges and universities and stuff. I think that will provide you with a form, but so the forms are there. And while Luis was doing his presentation, I went ahead and was looking to see how you can access that online version. When you get to this page, what I did is I clicked on the Z Suites online record book, frequently asked questions, and that took me to the PDF file. And basically, it's got all the information that you will need if you want to do this online. It's got a link here, which took me to this page. And it's if y'all remember, we used to do online record books probably, I don't know, Luis, what was it, about 8 years ago we tried using this format?
Yes.
And what it was we were actually creating a profile and through an email and a password and things like that. And once you go in there, you can start working on your record book, save it, and then come back and add additional information as throughout the if you're you don't have to complete it all in one day. You can just go ahead and add additional information. But anyway, I wanted to go ahead and share that information with the audience tonight. So hopefully, again, the easiest way to access all this information is is on your search engine. Just type in Texas 4-H record books, and that'll give you the first thing that pops up is record books Texas 4-H, which will take you to this page right here, and that's where all the forms and all the guides and everything that you will need to put your record book together. It'll all be that page. So let me see if I can go back. Okay, so I quit sharing. For those of you that joined us a little late today in today's presentations, one of the things that we mentioned and some of the questions that were asked prior to the workshop tonight is, when are record books due? Again, if you're going to be, we don't know if there's going to be a district record book judging, but district record book judging is usually sometime in July, usually the second week of July. If we are going to be having a district record book judging, then we will need these record books the last week of June. And that's the way we've always done it. Usually the last Friday of June, we collect these record books, and I'll go ahead and look at them. If there's any corrections or competition between record books, we'll go ahead and take care of that prior to them going to district. But if you're not going to be considering putting these record books in any competition, and you're just going to be completing a record book for awards consideration, then those record books are going to be due at the end of August, August 31st, which is going to be the end of the 4-H year. So with that, I'll go ahead and end the comments that I have tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
Looks like I did an amazing job, Omar.
You sure did, Luis. Especially at doing this in 1 hour, I'll tell you what.
Well, it's I know people's time are important, and is important, and so hopefully didn't talk too fast, and people are able to do this. I will tell you, if you want to see this again for some strange reason, you can actually go to our Facebook page, and I did this as a Facebook Live yesterday, and so it's listed on our feed, and it may be a little different, but it's on there if you want to watch that. And I told Ahmad at the beginning that we would, record this, and it's very possible this particular training we can put it up on a YouTube, and Ahmad, you can share the link with your families as well.
Yes, that's correct. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and some of the things that I get from people that are beginning, that have never done a record book, and they're a little shy that they don't get all the information in the right places, or they're doing it wrong, things like that. The one thing I'm going to tell you tonight is just do one, and we'll sort through where that information and the format of these record books, but just getting started and putting one together, and then everything, it will be so much simpler after you start. And when you get into your second year or subsequent years after that, everything will just be so natural, and everything just becomes easier. But the hardest thing is just getting one started. So again, if you've never done one before, that's going to be the biggest challenge, is starting one. But once you do it, everything should be easier.
I agree. Well, thanks for the invite, Omar, and appreciate everybody being on. And if there's anything I can help you with, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Omar or Yolanda, and be glad to work with them to help you get the information you need.
All right, Luis, thanks a lot, and appreciate you being with us tonight.
All right, you all have a great evening. Thank you.
All right, you take care.
Adios.